Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Dr. Lola Brooks. I'm part of the research commissioning team here at ADR UK. And this is one of our series in our webinars to support you as applicants in using administrative data in research and being able to write a funding application for our upcoming call. So just to give you a little insight into why we fund research fellowships, we want to enable policy relevant research that uses our ADR flagship datasets. And this is underpinned by our ADR UK flagship framework. We want to enable and support new users to our flagship datasets. And our programme is open to all accredited researchers. As new applicants to our funding programme or those that use our flagship data in any aspect of research, we want to build on previous and successful ADR UK Research Fellowships and their programme of works, which you can find out more about on our webpage. In essence, we want to inspire the use of ADR flagship data and drive research that benefits society. Now, in part of our kind of offerings to support those that want to apply to our program, we have developed this series of webinars. And this is to showcase the breadth and depth of the opportunity and your potential research objectives and help you write your applications, but also explain what we're looking for. And we want to help researchers develop feasible and robust research agendas based on the composition of each flagship datasets. Now, today we do have a webinar specifically for one of our flagship datasets, and this will help enable engagement with those that sit behind the dataset, those that are most informed about what's in the dataset and what's possible when you want to develop research using the dataset. And we're very fortunate today that we've got Georgina and Matteo and Safi and Chris, who are part of a team that organise, support and have great knowledge in our flagship dataset, which is the Family Court linked to Cafcass and Census 2021 England dataset, and it is an ADR England flagship data. So I'm going to pause my slides there and hand back over, I can pause it, hand back over to the Data First more broadly team and welcome the first speaker to the stage. If you'd like to share your slides, please.
Yep, I'll proceed to share my slides.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I confirm you can all see the slides?
We can indeed. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So, yeah, as it's already been mentioned, we're going to talk through some details about this linked data set that uses data from various sources. And the areas that will be covered will be, we will start with an overview of the Data First Family Court dataset. We will then have an overview of the Cafcass dataset, and then an overview of the Census 2021 dataset as well. And then we will, of course, go through the Family Court Cafcass and Census 2021 linked dataset as well. And we will then have a look at what the research priorities for this linked dataset are for this year, and have a look at a few examples of research already conducted on it. And then we're going to go through how to actually apply for access to this dataset and where to find further information if you need to. And finally, we will end with a Q&A session where you can ask any questions you may have. So when it comes to the Data First Family Court dataset, it comes from Family Man, which is short for Family Management. And it was essentially the information management system that the family courts used during the period that's covered in it. So it's effectively administrative information on the processes of the family courts and all the cases that went on in it. It covers England and Wales from the 1st of January 2011 to the 31st of January 2021. Although we hope that there will be a refreshed version available of this dataset that will run until the 31st of March 2023. We hope this will be available before this 2025 fellowship begins. And it's also worth noting that the period covered is based on the date that an event was entered into the Family Man system. So it's not necessarily when an event actually happened, but it covers when it entered the system. The data set is also deduplicated and de-identified. So multiple people that might have appeared in multiple instances, potentially in multiple cases, have all been deduplicated. So they will not show up as duplicates. And it's also de-identified. So every sort of row that's in the data set does not have any personal identifiable information. And all of this was done with Splink, which is a linking package developed by the MOJ, also publicly available, that could perform this probabilistic linking of the data sets on a large scale. It's also worth noting, though, that the linking is not perfect because it's heavily dependent on demographic information. So it is dependent on the demographic information actually being available and of good quality. So missingness in the data does affect the quality of the linkage. So we recommend that if you are interested in using this data, that you contact us first, and we can have a look at the feasibility of what you want to do and make sure that the data is of good quality. There are 76 variables across the family court dataset, and they are spread across 3 separate tables that cover sort of separate aspects of the processes. One of them is about cases, one is about events, and then another one is about the people involved. And we will now look into these separate tables in a bit more detail. And there is a link in the slides that you can use as well to access the catalog for this data if you want to know more. So the first and probably the main table in the dataset is the cases table, which contains information about the cases that were brought to the family court. Things like case type, the number of hearings, the court name of the court that handled it, the fees paid, and also the key dates. Information on divorces and marriages were available, and also some flags like whether there was legal representation or a contact activity provider was involved. And it can also, of course, join to the other 2 tables, and you can link them that way and get information about events and people as well. When it comes to the events table, instead of having information just on the general cases, we have information on the events that went on within the cases. So, for example, the event description, the court where the events happened, how many children were involved, key dates, of course, and some information on the hearing applications and order informations, for example, what type of hearing there was, application types, whether they were withdrawn, specific orders that were issued, and other information again on the courts, such as the court names and what tier of the judiciary was involved. And the third and final table in this data set is the people table. So one has the cases, one has the events within the cases. This one has information on the people that were involved in the cases, and it has demographic or personal information such as gender, month and year of birth, only for children though, LSOA of residence, local authority of residence, and also a unique party ID that you can use to sort of differentiate between the unique parties in the cases, what role they played in the cases as well, and other information on the case types that can also be linked back to the cases table. So to make a quick summary, you've got 3 separate tables, but they can be joined to each other, so you can get a really good overview of the cases, who were involved in the cases, and the events that formed part of the processes. So that is it for the overview of the family court dataset. I will now hand over to Saif to talk about the Cafcass dataset.
Hi everyone, so I'm Saif. I'm the Senior Research and Evaluation Manager at Cafcass England. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Cafcass England dataset that's available in Sale. Just moving on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So Cafcass England dataset covers the period 1st of April 2007 to our most recent data refresh, which was the 1st of October 2025. So quite a recent period that it covers. We normally refresh our data every 6 months within the Sale data bank. The data is derived from our case management system, which is called Child First. So that's the case management system that all social workers that are working within Cafcass England enter their information in, and that's what you can find within our data in Sale. The way that data is split is between two essential levels. So case level, so all information about the cases that those that are involved in a case were on, and also at a person level, so kind of the children and the parties that are involved in the case characteristics. So this table just kind of gives a bit of an overview in terms of what kind of information you can find. This is kind of the more kind of basic level in terms of the type of information that you can see. So in terms of the case level information, it goes down to the kind of local authority and court involved. You can split by whether it's a public law case or private law, the different types of applications you're able to see, which includes kind of the various details about that application, hearings and legal output, so what the outcome of the case was in terms of the legal outcome from our perspective, so at the point at which Cafcass was no longer involved in the case. The work carried out by Cafcass as well. So whether there are any particular reports, such as the Section 7 carried out, the safeguarding letters and whether they were filed, and also and including the dates and position statements and guardian statements from our perspective too, and dates around that. And then finally, kind of whether there are any experts involved with the case too. Then at the person level information, so there'll be information around the week of the date of birth of the child involved in the case, diversity characteristics. We've improved our diversity characteristic collection and recording quite significantly since 2016, 2017. So that there's quite good information available on ethnicity at the moment, and also increasingly more on the other diversity characteristics that are flagged there. Relationships are included, so the relationships between the applicant and the respondent and the child involved in the case. And then particular types of contact information, information around LSOA in terms of where the parties were are located, and then other information also included around whether the date of death, if applicable, is there too. When we refresh our data, we tend to include any kind of recent updates to our case management system as well. So I think in our most recent refresh that happened on the 31st of October, we included a bit more detail around Pathfinder, data that we have on in Pathfinder area. So, and if you're not aware of Pathfinder, that's the private law reform mechanism, pilot mechanism that's being tested in several areas across England. It's also worth noting that this covers Cafcass England data, so Cafcass Cymru, which is the Welsh equivalent of Cafcass, have their own separate case management system and their own separate database, but that is also located in Sale, and it is possible to link data with them as well. But and I think I'm coming on later to some examples of projects that have used Cafcass England data and Cafcass Cymru data. But yeah, that's a general overview of the Cafcass England data that's available in Sale at the moment, and I think I'm now handing over onto the census data. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm happy if you just want to move to the next slide, Matthew. Thanks. And hello, everyone. My name is Chris Stickney. I'm a senior statistician at the Office for National Statistics. I didn't work actually a lot on the 2021 census, but the teams that still are responsible for Census 2021 work with me. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the census data that's in Sale, mainly about the microdata that Census is on its own rather than how it's linked to Cafcass. So most of you will know we run a census every 10 years. And I'm referring to the England and Wales census. We've been doing it actually since back in 1801 was the first census we did. We have placed the census now in sale to allow academics for research purposes to look at very, very detailed data, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute, about the population in England and Wales. We had a really high response rate, 97%. And of course, the non-response we also impute. So we have a very accurate, reliable data set which talks about the population, about society, labor market, and households at the point in time in March 2021. And of course, it's worth knowing that that specific, although it's a very rich, detailed data set, that reference period 2021, of course, was during periods of lockdown and the pandemic. But we believe it to be a very accurate census in terms of representing what society looked like at that point in time. If you go to the next slide. Thank you. So the census data that's in sale, as I said, it includes a variety of data around demographics, cultural information, labor market, household, etc. And when we say data, it's actually split over a number of tables. The resident table is where you get your demographic information on age and sex, etc. But then also information around language, identity information, their language, religion, passport, country of birth, employment status, etc. But of course, also we can you can find out information about people within a single household or the type of household in the household data set. So you can either link persons to the household ID to find out who lives where, or again about the type of household they live in. So the household data set has information around accommodation type, bedrooms, heating, ownership type, and number of cars. Also persons per bedroom. And then the family data set is where it brings together information on the type of family that a person lives in within each household. And finally, communal establishments, which we did enumerate quite differently to a typical household. So you would use the communal establishment data set if you want to know more about the type of establishment people were living in, the number of residents in it, or the type of establishment it is. You'd still got all the information on persons in the resident table. As previously mentioned for geography, ours also, for looking at the census on its own, goes down to LSOA level, so quite a low level of geography for use to query. The next slide tells you a bit about how we link the data together. So you might want to look at, I don't know, a certain ethnic group of residents by a certain age, sex, and what type of accommodation they lived in, how many bedrooms they were in, what sort of family type. And you can do all that. So that table on the right, to produce that, you would need to link data together. This gives you that visual, and of course there'll be more information if you need it, but how you link IDs together to then go ahead and produce the tables on the right. So each table that you see on the left-hand side is linked together through IDs, either household ID, response ID, or family ID and dwelling ID. So that these unique IDs will join tables together through the visual on the left-hand side to go ahead and produce some of that granular detail that you might want in terms of linking multiple data sets together. A final point, sometimes you might just want to understand the general representation of a particular maybe ethnic group or whatever. And if this level of detail is perhaps just too complex for what your needs are to just understand what's going on with society, you can always Google the ONS Flexible Table Builder, or I think it's called Create a Custom Data Set. Either one of those, if you Google that, you can build quite detailed tables just online. It might not go to the level of detail you want, but perhaps gives you a decent representation of the type of person or people you are looking at. Hope that gives you some insight. Thanks, Matthew. I think we're now passing on to the linked census data with Cafcass.
Thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Georgina Eaton. I'm co-lead of the Data First Research Academic Engagement and Comms team within the Ministry of Justice. Just to give a broad overview, obviously we've heard about the 3 different data sets in isolation, and if we could just move to the next slide, please. This little infographic just gives you a bit of that kind of overview. So just to give a bit of history, so originally the Data First Family Court and Cafcass linked data set was the first ADR England flagship data set to be made available and linked with Census 2021 data. So it's still a reasonably new data set. We haven't seen sort of findings come out from this data set yet, but we've got projects that have applied to use this data set and that are kind of going through the approval process at the moment. But these are linked on a person level, and we've mentioned sort of all the different sort of things that you could consider within your research, and we will talk through like some of the research priorities that have been identified for this particular fellowship. But just to also outline that there is work ongoing as well at the moment to build sort of this case level linkage between Family Court and Cafcass as well. So hopefully with the refreshers as well, that can continue to be ongoing if that is useful for research as well. So moving on to what our research priorities are for this fellowship. So if we go to the next slide, so there is a document that's been made available online, and the link is included in the slides, and you will get access to the slides following this event if you haven't seen that document before. But just to sort of highlight what the different areas are that have been identified. So there's sort of the areas around the characteristics of family court users, and obviously with linking with Census and Cafcass data, we can get more sort of granular information. So things like, you know, what's the household compositions of families in the justice system? Who are they? Where do they live? Who do they live with? What is their kind of journey through the system? And what happens sort of following contact with the system? There's also another research priority around characteristics of cases involving litigants in person or legal representation. So you can look at things like what's the nature of family cases involving litigants in person, which for those of you that may not know, this is where parties who represent themselves in court. And how do they differ from cases where there is legal representation? So, for example, how many cases involve litigants in person versus those in legal representation? Do the length of those proceedings differ? And what are their characteristics? Then there's also sort of priority around inequalities and intersectionality. So exploring the outcomes of different groups in the system and how characteristics interact. So, for example, outcomes for minority groups and those with multiple protected characteristics, and do different groups differ in how they interact with the family justice services? So things like, are they more or less likely to have legal representation or to attend mediation? And obviously with the added benefit of having census data, there's a lot more sort of demographic information in that data set that we can bring in as well. So things like, yeah, as Chris mentioned, like ethnicity, gender, disability, sort of combination of those different characteristics as well. There's also some interest around doing sort of some comparisons as well in terms of location and geography. So particularly around the England and Wales population. So how do different characteristics, maybe things like education and qualifications or employment from the census, sort of linking that in with the family court users and doing sort of comparisons with the general population. You know, does this vary by case or role type? And how do the outcomes of children who are involved in family court proceedings compare to children who are not involved? And are there different things that we can find out about that? And also sort of around sort of at the lower level, the regional variations. So we mentioned there's sort of access to local authority level information. So, and what kind of regional variations can be discovered? You know, is there sort of any patterns that we can start looking at around public and private law cases, for example? maybe the differences between applications sought and orders made in different areas. So that's another area of interest. And finally, some sort of another priority is around the use of mediation. So things like what is the extent that mediation is being used and in what circumstances? How does the trajectory of a case differ if mediation is used? And what are the characteristics of family court users where mediation is being used? So I suppose just to note that obviously there's sort of no right or wrong way to kind of approach this. So research proposals could take an overview of a particular area, or you may want to focus on a more specific question related to one or more of these themes. But it's really helpful if you can, in your application forms, make specific references to these research priorities, that will really benefit your application. But also as well, just to flag that the Ministry of Justice have recently published updated areas of research interest. So if you can show links to that as well, that would be really beneficial. And obviously, as we've kind of mentioned already, if you've sort of forming research questions around any of these priorities and you want to check feasibility, then please get in contact with us and we will have our contact details available at the end, because it's really good to discuss these things earlier on and to check that you're kind of working along the right lines in terms of your feasibility of your projects. If we can move on, please, to the next slide. So we thought it might be helpful just to give some examples of research that's being undertaken with these data sets. As I mentioned, at the moment, we haven't got any kind of findings or from any like approved projects using the Family Court, Cafcass and Census linked data, but we do have some projects that have been using the Family Court and Cafcass linked data. So in one of our previous fellowships, we had 2 researchers working on some different projects, and you can see kind of quite sort of some different themes coming through. So we had one on exploring the family justice experience of young mothers in England. So this was looking at demographic characteristics of young mothers in the family justice system and how frequently these mothers were involved in family court cases during their youth and adulthood, looking at family justice experiences and outcomes for young mothers, and the risk of termination of parental rights through adoption among those young mothers and what factors moderate risk. And then the second project on domestic abuse proceedings in family courts and the overlaps and pathways in private and public family justice. So this project was looking at what the characteristics of domestic abuse cases in the family courts, and how the domestic abuse cases overlap with other cases heard in the family courts. Also was looking at what are the main pathways through the family justice system for individuals and families who experience domestic abuse. So really interesting projects. There is a link to their kind of project pages. So if you want to check out any of the outputs from those, they are kind of saved on that page. But I'm sure if you want to reach out to the 2 fellows, then they would also be happy to kind of talk more about their research if that's of interest. So yeah, their contacts are there. So it's Dr. Mariam Abalounian and Dr. Ludovine Garside. If we go to the next slide, please. We've also got a few other projects that have been using Family Court and Cafcass data. So these are from Swansea University and Lancaster University, and they've been using Family Court and Cafcass data. So we've got one called Born into Care, Newborns in Care Proceeding in Wales, and this project aimed to provide the first estimate and profile of cases of newborns subject to care proceedings in the Family Court in Wales. by linking family justice data to population level health data in the SAL data bank, looking at characteristics of babies, older children, mothers and fathers involved in care proceedings, as well as health service use during pregnancy and the postnatal period. There was another project looking at private family law cases in England and Wales, looking at profiles, pathways and outcomes. And the purpose of the project was to better describe the characteristics of families involved in private law disputes, and looking at comparisons over time with the general population and with families and people involved in public law cases. And then finally, sort of an extension to that one was looking at the pathways of family in private law proceedings in England and Wales. So the overarching aim of this project was to add to the overall evidence base around private law, exploring the pathways of families through private law proceedings with a view to improving the experiences and outcomes of children and families. And as I mentioned, this is kind of a follow-on project to the work undertaken by the Family Justice Data Partnership. And I'm now going to pass over to Saif, who's going to talk through about some of the research that's been undertaken using Cafcass data on SAIL.
Hi again. So yeah, this is just to give an example of some of the research that's been undertaken previously with Cafcass data on SAIL. I know we've got a couple. We've got Bashar and Linda here as well, who've probably recognised a couple of these papers because they were heavily involved in them. So yeah, quite a few different papers here, but it kind of highlights the extent of the Cafcass England data set and what's possible with it. We've already talked about the newborn babies in urgent care proceedings, and there's research that's done on that for England and Wales, uncovering private family law, so who's coming to court in England, so understanding the demographic characteristics of children and families that enter the family court proceedings in private law in particular. Got some examples from what's been undertaken with the Cafcass Wales data set, which, as I mentioned earlier, has greater possibilities in terms of linkage, given their role within the Welsh government, but also obviously with the wider family court data set. So this one looking at adult characteristics and vulnerabilities of those that go through the family court in Wales. And then there's been various other ones around looking at the profile of older children and young people in care proceedings in England and Wales, understanding those what we know more about children and young people that are deprived of their liberty in England and Wales, which is a bit of a mix of using the population data that was available in SAIL and also other qualitative research methods as well. And then we've had a few projects in recent years which have been looking at the ethnicity profile of children and families that enter the family justice system as well, again using the improved data that we've been collecting in Cafcass England on ethnic characteristics of children and families that enter court proceedings. But yeah, this is just to kind of highlight some of the projects that have been possible using Cafcass England data so far, but also the potential once with this linkage to be able to extract kind of greater findings and insights through the partnership with the family court data and the Census 21 data as well. So just to give an idea of what's possible. Handing over again. Thank you.
Thank you. And obviously, you know, with the linkage available with census status, that just opens up so many more opportunities for wider research. So yeah, we're really keen for people to take up this opportunity and make some applications and get in touch. We're just going to cover applying for access. So obviously this is more at the point of the kind of process sort of following maybe a potential successful application, or if you wanted to make a sort of separate application outside of this fellowship opportunity. But just to kind of very quickly go over the stages for accessing the data. So you'll need to become an accredited researcher. So do sort of signpost some particular training for that. Then the sort of process would be to create a scoping form with the SAIL data bank and the information governance review panel form as well. There'll also need to be a research project application form, which will be supplied by Cell Data Bank, depending what information is used as well. There is sort of a supplementary form that's required for the use of the family court data. So if you're using that, then there is an MOJ separate form, Ministry of Justice form, which again, SAIL would provide to you. And obviously, if there are any queries about what's included in that form, then you can get in touch with the Data First team on that. We do ask as well that you create a full variable list with all the data sets that are being used with a justification against the variables that you're using. The justifications don't have to be particularly long and detailed, as long as it's clear why you're selecting certain variables. There might be variables that actually we say, oh no, if you're trying to do this thing, then you need to use this variable. So it's just useful to understand what you think you're using particular variables for. And obviously really important to think about as well data minimization when you're kind of going through the variables. It's important that you're kind of only using the variables that you actually will need to do your research. Then you'll need to kind of gain approval from the different data owners involved, and then you'll receive sort of final approval from the UKSA Research Accreditation Panel, and then the data will be ingested and ready for access. But obviously, if there's any particular questions about some of those stages, there will be colleagues as well from the Cell Data Bank that can help you through that process. And as I said, you can reach out to any of us as well. So I think on the next slide, there's just some contact details if you'd like to get in touch with us. So if you've got any queries specifically about the Data First Family Court data set, please use our team email datafirst@justice.gov.uk, and one of the members of the team will pick up your query. And we've got Saif's and Chris's email addresses on there as well. If you've got questions about Cafcass data or census data, there's some further links to information on there. So as Matteo mentioned earlier, on our Data First webpage, we have an updated data catalogue, so you can see what variables are available in the Data First Family Court data set. And there's also the HDR gateway that also has all of the data sets that are available in Cell and what's included in those as well. So yeah, do look on the Cell Data Bank website for links to that as well. But I think that kind of wraps up what we were going to say, and I think we can move now to the Q&A session.
Thank you very much. First of all, I just want to say thanks all the speakers, Matteo, Saif, Georgina, and Chris, just for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to hear about the data. I think I've personally learned a lot. I've seen and read about it, but it's nice to have it all strung together and the story really unpacked. I'm just going to ask Steve to join us just to see if there have been any questions are posted from those in the audience or those who have sent through questions in advance, because I appreciate this is going to be recorded and made available on our webpage, so anyone can pop back and listen to it at a later date.
Hi everyone. Yes, not many questions come through so far in the Q&A, but I think we can give people an opportunity to perhaps formulate their question and post that up. So Lola, I think we've had some questions that come through in advance. Yeah, do you want to pick one of those that perhaps we could ask?
Probably a more general question, and I think you kind of touched it across the team within the talk, but I have an idea. I'm not sure if it's not feasible. Who should I contact first, SAIL or the MOJ team, please?
I would say it probably depends the data sets that are being used. So for example, if you were just looking at using family court and census data, then you wouldn't need to get in touch with Cafcass. But obviously, I think if you're looking across all three, there might be certain elements of your project where you want to kind of discuss with all three. So it might be best in some cases to email all three, and we can kind of answer on our particular elements. But if there's something specific relating to, say, family court data, then the Data First team would be the one to contact. We can probably provide a bit more detailed feasibility comments than SAIL, but I think if there's something maybe related to the SAIL processes, then get in touch with SAIL on that.
That's super helpful, and actually distinguishing who kind of sits behind each factor is really helpful. And there's another question that came in advance actually in relation to that, and I think it kind of goes back down to how they plan for access. It's like, is there a cost associated with using this data set? Because it has to go through SAIL. Does it mean they have to cost in, because I think they're thinking about the kind of cost justifications within the breakdown. Does it cost to access this data? Or is it the data process through SAIL they have to pay for?
That's more of a question for SAIL.
Perfect. Okay.
To direct to, unless anyone else knows.
Yeah, I think there are some costs for accessing data by a SAIL. Yes, in that case, I would certainly recommend contacting SAIL. But yeah, we'll also have some information going up on our website about that shortly as well, for accessing data both through SAIL and through the ONS SRS as well. So keep an eye out for that. But in the first instance, costs, definitely have a chat with SAIL. Yeah, just to follow up on that about getting access to all the data, if I could. There's obviously quite a lot of process that someone needs to go through. And I'm just wondering if, from your experience, having been involved in this before, could you give perhaps an indication of how long it would take someone to actually have their project space ready to go in SAIL? How long's a piece of string? I know.
That's a tough one. All I can probably say is that I know obviously there's quite a lot of steps there, and we've been, well, my team in particular, we've been working with SAIL to try and streamline this process as much as possible. Obviously, I think there's a slight comment as well in the chat, which hopefully will kind of cover this, but essentially what we've done in the past is, because obviously, you know, I think the sooner you get in touch with us to check feasibility, that will help speed up the process. I think as well, obviously, we get to see the applications as they sort of come through to the panel. Once there's kind of decision around which applications are going to go forward as part of the research fellowship within the Ministry of Justice anyway, we then sort of take those projects as a priority to get them through our panels as quick as we can. It does depend sometimes on you know, the complexities of the project, and obviously I think if I mentioned particularly the variable lists, if these are kind of well written in terms of, you know, they've got solid justifications against different variables, and if the applications are well written, showing clear links to research priorities, showing, you know, value of the research, showing that they've sort of reached out and engaged and checked feasibility in advance, then this will definitely speed up the process and save the kind of back and forth that can kind of happen sometimes, which can cause delays. So yeah, I wouldn't want to put like a number on it, but
Yeah.
To be honest, it can take, obviously, I think we're talking you know, months more than weeks, and obviously it can take time to get like obviously it's approval from, you've got Cafcass involved as well, and Census. So obviously there needs to be approval from different areas, as well as sales information governance panel and the research accreditation panel. But usually these fellowships kind of get prioritized anyway, because obviously there's a sort of set period where the funding period sort of starts and kicks off. So we're trying to deliver to the deadline.
So I think probably we could say the key message there is engage early with the data owners to work on the feasibility aspect of your project, and then should you be successful at the funding panel, begin the data access process as soon as possible after that. Because well, the projects are scheduled to start in September of next year, so you will have some time, but don't count on it being a quick process. I think is probably the key message.
And I think I don't know, Saif, you may know, I have a feeling that people can potentially could always start their scoping form at the point of, you know, when they actually put in their research fellowship application. So that might at least kickstart a bit of a process there.
Do you mean with Sale, Georgina?
Yeah.
I think so. I think you can have an early conversation with Sale about what you're planning to do in terms of your research, and you can kind of they can help you scope what that will look like ahead of you commencing. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity to do that initially.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Lola, do you want to pick up any other questions that have come in advance, and I'll just have a quick look at those that have just been posted. You're all crackly, I'm afraid.
Now?
Yes.
Amazing. It was about linkage and clarification over whether the researcher links the data themselves, or whether the data comes once they've requested the variables, if the data is linked for them and then kind of uploaded within to the trusted research environment. And if the researcher has to link it themselves, is there any support or guidance with developing code to do this? And if there's training that potentially sits behind this. I think the person who sent in the inquiry, it was to our general inquiries inbox, wanted to kind of unpick what knowledge they might need and what skills they might need in order to be able to use this data set. Don't know if anyone in the team wants to pick that up.
Saif, do you know, because I don't actually know how it actually comes to the researcher. I believe it's pre-linked, but there might be some sort of manipulation that's kind of required.
Yeah, I'm not entirely certain. Yeah, I think there would be some work that needs to be done in terms of how that is constructed, but I know. Yeah, I'm just trying to think if you can lean upon previous projects or not. But I mean, I'm sure Sale initially would provide some guidance in terms of what that would look like. But you might need some support in terms of how you would then kind of work through those tables. But yeah, someone less familiar in terms of how that looks and from the other end, it's probably a conversation you need to have with Sal or others that have utilized the linked data set before to potentially provide some guidance.
And I don't know, I think Ludovine's on the call. She might be able to provide, or anyone else. I think is Linda and Bashar still around as well. I don't know how they might be able to give some insights into some of that, but there are researchers that obviously have worked on this, and there might be, you know, we definitely encourage researchers to kind of potentially share code where possible. You know, it's really helpful to help other users get on board and get familiar with the data. So if there is a potential there to kind of share findings and code, that would be helpful as well.
I think Ludovini's actually just put a little post up there saying scoping is definitely needed with sale prior to submitting your funding application, not least in order to work out what the budget costings will be. So yeah, good advice from someone who's been there and done it.
And I think Linda's kindly posted on as well, saying that the data sets are provided separately, so the linkage is down to the researchers, and it's not entirely straightforward. Thank you, Linda, for letting us know. But obviously, I think if there is anything that can be done in this area around, sharing code and that sort of thing that might be helpful, then yeah, we can look into that.
Excellent. And I see Saif, you've already answered this in the chat, but I thought it might be just worth reading it out. And it was about the case level information, e.g. the work Cafcass did with the court, or just a yes no that a report was written.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry,
yeah.
So yeah, it's worth clarifying. So all data that we include in SAIL is structured data, so it wouldn't include reports that we actually produce for the court as part of our advice. So things like the safeguarding letter or the Section 7 reports that we would produce within private law. So it would just, in reference to those documents, it would state whether we had filed those reports. So it would be a binary yes or no, and also any other detail like date and whether it was submitted. Yeah, in terms of right filing time and stuff. So yeah, that would be the kind of information it includes, like that kind of population level data rather than the more unstructured data which the question refers to.
Okay. I don't know. I think the questions may have slowed up a little bit, but unless you have anything from the pre-submitted questions, Lola?
I do have a couple more. I'm just trying to work out if they've already been answered or if there's time to unpack it a bit more. To do with census, actually.
Right, you've gone quite crackly again.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can we can hear you, but you're crackly. Ella.
There's lots of banging in the background, which is why I keep putting them in. It was to do with the census data and understanding what variables can be used and what can't be used, and if there was any opportunity to include additional variables going forward, or is it quite specific in terms of what's possible and what's not possible? Basically, if it's not listed in the dictionary, it's not possible, or is there any room for manoeuvre? I think everyone sees the power and the benefit that census could bring to kind of doing that kind of backbone through the data set.
Yeah, I wasn't part of the original negotiation or discussion about what went into SAIL. So I think depending on the timeline for any project, what is in the data dictionary should be complete, as in that's probably what you might be constrained to. I think we as an Office for National Statistics would always want to know what user needs are, whether it's from researchers, people on the call, or those either through ADR or through SAIL if they're getting repeated requests for particular variables to be added. I mean, like, I think we'd want to know that. As always, and you've already mentioned it, I think it was you, Lola, someone, about just the importance of data minimization. I think we obviously thought hard about what to make available. We're also conscious of some of the variables either were quite affected by the pandemic, not in terms of data quality issue, but just it represents that point in time. Or indeed some of the issues that we had with some of the questions like gender identity. We know there were challenges around that. There's really good guidance that you can Google on things like that from ONS that talk through some of that. So it's a long answer to your question that I think what's available now, if you're under time pressure, that's probably what you would get within SAIL. But we'd want to know the longer term what the user needs are.
Amazing. So if anyone's got any feedback, I think the answer then is just to get in contact with you, because I think that's super helpful as well. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they didn't specify what variables in the email. It was quite high end. So I'd be interested to see what it is that they would like to be included.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. I will get back to them. And if there's anything that can help, I will pass it on.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
I don't have anything that generally has come in, Steve, and I am conscious we've got a few more minutes. So is there anything else in the chat? Or if there's anything that the speakers want to raise that they think is kind of should be reiterated, underpinned. I think the feasibility is a running trend through the presentation, as in just getting in contact. I don't know if it's worth flagging up the areas of research interest, Georgina, that have been recently published, just so everyone who is on the call, because we will post kind of anything that's raised in the chat function as well, just to highlight it again.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, that's been sort of very recently published. There is sort of an area in there that kind of looks at family justice related sort of areas. So yeah, do check that out. And obviously if there's anything that kind of directly links in or could form part of your research question, that would be great. But yeah, as I said, definitely in the applications, just making sure that you kind of highlight where you're kind of where you've got links to either MOJ areas of interest or the fellowship research priorities, because that will definitely strengthen the application, and it makes the panel's jobs easier as well when it comes to reviewing the application as well, because I can just tick that box off.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the questions have pretty much dried up for now, Lola. But I'll just wrap up and say, by all means, get in touch with any or all of us. We're all here to help and make sure that you've got the best chance of putting in a successful application. So use the resources that are available, talk to us, and we'll do whatever we can to help.
Thank you. And I think this wraps us up. I want to thank the speakers again and just highlight we do still have a few more data specific webinars coming up, but we also have the community catalysts giving a talk about research priorities or research agendas, or more specifically gaps that they found in our understanding of particular topics when it comes to social knowledge and what we need to improve information on around social engagement with policy. That's coming up on Thursday, the 13th of November. I do recommend coming along and listening to that. And again, if you've missed any of the webinars, inclusive of the opportunity briefing and how to write a good funding application, those have been recorded and will be available on our website. The email address there is for any questions you have regarding the broader programme. And again, we will happily share the slides after on the website so you can get the information on how to contact the team that have presented here if you have any questions regarding this data set. And I just want to thank everyone for coming today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Everyone.